The enemy is within our gates. Hey friends, thanks for dropping by for this week's edition of the Israel Frontline Update. I'm Bishop Robert Stearns. There is so much to talk about this week happening in the greater Middle East, and the fact that everything that happens in the greater Middle East seems to have an extraordinary impact right now in America as well. Two important topics I want to delve into really strongly this week. But before we get started, if it's your first time, second time on the channel, thanks for dropping by. Hit the subscribe button, the like button, the share button. For the past 32 years, I have been in the Middle East and bringing you updates, bringing you reports, and bringing many of you to Israel with me. And so glad to have you drop by today as we delve into these topics. Number one, this is stunning. There's a new report exposing the level of anti-Israel bias throughout the American public school system, specifically fueled by secret funds from Qatar. This is one of the most in-depth reports that I have seen. And you know, a lot of times we look and we question, how is it that these students at Columbia, at other Ivy League universities, just young people in general, where are they getting these ideas? Folks, they're getting it from somewhere. The Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy has released a terrifying new report about the level of infection in American public education, American school curriculums. By the way, this is your taxpayer dollars at work. This is your local school board. But this curriculum that they have uncovered, it's called the Choices Curriculum. It has been funded, at least in part, by the Qatar Foundation International, QFI. It is used in over 8,000 schools in all 50 states in America. 8,000 schools, all 50 states. And this study, this investigation, shows that the curriculum was gradually changed over a period of time to present an increasingly anti-Israel perspective. In other words, this didn't just happen overnight, but there was this slow and ongoing distortion of reality surrounding Israel and the Middle East. Now, if you've been following things since October 7th, you have learned that the leaders of Hamas, they don't live in Gaza, they don't live in Judea and Samaria, what's otherwise known as the West Bank. Where do the leaders of Hamas live? They choose to live in Qatar. And the royal family sponsors the global broadcaster Al Jazeera. So Qatar, you know, Iran we know about, right? We talk a lot about Iran because of the threat of nuclear capability. But I want to tell you, more and more, we are finding that the funding and the strategy, the mastermind behind this, is coming from Qatar. Listen to this quote from Dr. Charles Small, the executive director of ISGAP, who produced this study. "This is a direct attempt to manipulate American students by embedding ideologically motivated foreign propaganda into American students' education. Foreign entities with known ties to extremist ideology should not be shaping how American children learn about history and the Middle East." I want to urge you, if you're a parent, if you're a grandparent, I want to urge you to ask your children, your grandchildren, hey, could I see your social studies textbook? Could I see your history textbook? And begin to look up and look into the teachings regarding Israel and the greater Middle East. Because this study very conclusively, and there's pages and pages of documentation here. And by the way, you can go to isgap.org, ISGAP.org, to read the entire study. But it says that Qatar is using billions of dollars in unchecked funding to influence decision makers, academic institutions, media, and other power centers in the West. A correlating study by the Americans for Public Trust found that $60 billion $60 billion of foreign funding has been funneled into American universities, the primary donors being Qatar and China. Folks, you don't lose a nation in a day. You lose a nation by a multi-pronged approach, by a very sophisticated, multi-dimensional attack on the foundational elements of that society. So you've got everything that's going on right now in TikTok and social media. You've got the propaganda happening there. And now, conclusively, we have uncovered here 8,000 American schools using curriculum in all 50 states that has been specifically funded by Qatar to very slowly, a drip feed campaign, change young people's mindsets. This is diabolical. This is horrific. And this is what happens when Americans are asleep at the wheel. This is what happens when American churches unplug from public life and we decide we're going to pursue God in our conferences and we're going to pursue God in our revival glory meetings, but we're not going to get involved in the school board. And we're not going to get involved in knowing what's happening in education for our children. And so I'm telling you, thank God that this current administration is getting involved in saying what is going into our American public education system. But can I tell you something? That's not truly the job of the administration. It's the job of parents. It's the job of parents and grandparents and local taxpayers to know what curriculum is being used in your local taxpayer-funded school system. All right, now the second main topic I want to delve into this week, there's so much to talk about, but these two things really have stood out to me. I want to bring them to your attention. There has been a lawsuit filed in New York State federal court that is accusing several American activist organizations of having prior knowledge of the October 7th attacks. Now, this is unbelievable. I don't know why we're not hearing this in the mainstream news, but there has been a lawsuit filed specifically targeting Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine, Within Our Lifetime, Jewish Force for Peace, and their leaders. The complaint states that these groups had to have coordinated their actions with Hamas because after months of inactivity, listen to this, 3 minutes before Hamas began the October 7th attack, Columbia's Students for Justice posted on the social media platform the slogan, "We are back, stay tuned." 3 minutes. They had been silent for months, and 3 minutes before the attacks began, they said, "We are back, stay tuned." Then on midnight, on the very day of the attack, 83 SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, groups signed a joint statement supporting Hamas. Former hostage Shlomi Ziv testified that his Hamas captors, as he was a captive in Gaza, bragged about having Hamas operatives on American university campuses. They showed him news reports and pictures of the protests at Columbia University. Now you can find this information at i24news.tv. That's i24news.tv. This complaint details how these groups allegedly set up camps on the Columbia campus in April, disrupted Israeli history class, occupied several university buildings, distributing official Hamas brochures during the occupation of the university's library. Now, friends, if this is true, the level of criminality and the level of evil of this is extraordinary. What this is alleging is that it is very possible that Americans had prior information about the October 7th attacks and did nothing. If that is the case, this needs to be investigated to the absolute strongest degree. And these groups need to be dismantled and people need to be going to jail. The Constitution of the United States of America declares that we will withstand all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And the level of anti-American sentiment that is across these groups, that is openly calling, and they do it so artfully, they do it with such subtlety in the language they use. Phrases like globalize the intifada and from the river to the sea, etc., etc. So this is stunning to me. If this is true, I'm going to be following this. I'll bring you an update, because if this is proven that these groups had prior knowledge of the October 7th attacks, then I want to tell you things in America are far worse than we could have imagined. The enemy is within our gates. The enemy of the West, the enemy of the Judeo-Christian worldview, is within the gates of our nation. I want to encourage you right now, get involved, get active, get educated. It is not a time to sit on the sidelines. It is not a time. We're getting increasing reports, so sad, of churches, of families, of people whose loved ones are pressing back on them because of their stand right now for Israel, for America. Folks, America is not a perfect nation. Israel's not a perfect nation. This is not what we're talking about. There are extremists in America on the right. There's extremists in Israel. There's left-wing extremism, right-wing extremism. This is a reality. But what we're talking about is when you zoom out and you look at the basic human freedoms that we want our world to live in. America and Israel are uniquely fighting for these basic human dignities. You and I have to join that fight. And one of the ways we do it, you've already taken the step of. You've gotten involved. You've gotten yourself educated today. We will see you next week on the Israel Frontline Update.